All right, good morning, everybody, or afternoon. We're here with Zoe Does Life. She's a moderate left-winger who's also a bit of a skeptic with feminism and the growing authoritarianism of the left wing, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong here.
Very good.
We're glad to have her. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. By the way, I'm Isaac Yepes, and thank you for joining us. So let's just jump right into it. Is there any reclaiming of the title of feminism?
Wow, that's a big question. Feminism. I personally don't think that it's the title necessarily that's the most important thing. I guess it's the people and the actions of those people that operate under the title of feminist. In my opinion, a large number of those people have just muddied the water to such an extent that it's not worth using the title anymore. I know some people do make the argument that it's important to retain a title in order to save it, but I don't necessarily think it needs to be saved because, at least in the West anyway, I'm not sure that we need a movement like feminism anymore. So no, I don't think it is particularly important to keep that title.
Yeah, well, I remember you mentioning, was it Christina Hoff Sommers, and I'm gonna butcher this name. It's like here's Na Ali, I think.
Oh yeah, Iron.
There we go. I'm so sorry.
Right.
But yeah, you were mentioning how they still retain the title of feminist and call themselves feminists, and that might be the way forward for like you said, the people themselves to kind of push it forward and make it a positive thing again. Do you think we could see that anytime soon, or is it just kind of like an anomaly?
I don't think so, because I think with people like Iron Hirsi Ali, the word feminist doesn't seem to be that important to her. She dedicates her life to helping women under kind of Islamic law and victims of FGM. She calls herself a feminist, but as far as I'm aware, it doesn't shape her identity all that much. Whereas with a lot of feminists, what we're seeing is that it shapes their whole identity. They're very ideological about it, so they have a huge stronghold on what the majority of people see as feminism, whereas people like Iron, it's a tiny part of her. It's a label that isn't necessarily important. So good for people like her that can hold on to that label, but I don't think we're going to see kind of an uprising of more rational women trying to reclaim the title anytime soon, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, you mentioned identity, and that's become this huge aspect of a lot of people's lives. So what are your thoughts on the people that make their politics or their ideology or their gender, sexual identity? What are your thoughts on those people that make it like 80% of themselves rather than, hey, I'm a gay man who also, or something like that?
I just don't think it's the way to go, because if we take our ideas, so take feminism, and we take the ideas that feminism produce, make it everything about ourselves. So everything that we do, everything that we talk about is coming from a place of caring about those ideas. It closes you off from hearing anything new, and I think that is what we're seeing with people on the far left at the moment. Is they've taken their ideas, they've made them who they are, and now they're incapable of seeing anything else, any other perspectives. I don't think it's healthy at all. I think that you should never make ideas that big a part of you, because you should always be able to change and evolve and be friends with people that have different opinions. And I just think it stagnates things when we have people that are this set in their ideas, to the point where if you disagree with them, they take it as a personal attack.
I think that's definitely telling, because they've been using words like or terms like epistemological violence, systematic violence, or identitarian violence against them. And then we see things like the Antifa riots spill out into the streets. And I've always heard the criticism that when you use the word violence to describe something that's nonviolent, all you're doing is making it okay for people that agree with you to use actual physical violence to silence people that are trying to, I guess, criticize you. Do you think there's legitimacy to that?
I think so in some aspects. I don't think that violence, physical violence, is ever justified as a response to ideas. Yeah.
Oh, did I lose you there?
Yeah, sorry, I was like, you cut off like halfway through the question, so I was a bit like, oh, what am I talking about?
So I was just saying, do you think it legitimizes the use of violence from one side if they're calling nonviolent actions or words against them? I'm losing myself now.
Okay, yeah, no, I get you now. I've got you now. I think it's a classic case of watering down of words. So there was an example a couple of weeks ago of someone said that misgendering someone is an act of violence.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're calling that an act of violence, which by definition it's not, then it would be very easy for someone to turn around and say, well, you're being verbally violent with me, therefore why shouldn't I be physically violent with you as a response to your ideas? But I think that's ridiculous. But I get why, I get how people like that, people from that far specific side of things, have started to claim things like that, because I think it allows them to feel like their ideas can't be challenged or shouldn't be challenged because they're acts of violence, and then that it's very easy for them to turn it around and justify them getting actually violent with people that disagree.
Well, I think we saw that with the Richard Spencer sucker punch. I mean, even on my own campus, there was a lot of praise of that action. And I thought that was so strange, because it was like, well, why do you think that's okay? And they really have dehumanized anyone that disagrees with them, because like, well, he's a Nazi, like what rights does he have? And it's like, whoa, like we're going toward the path of the gulags firing up, and people that just have I guess unconscionable opinions get thrown in because, well, you basically forfeit your life the second you disagree. Do you think this, I guess, this authoritarian and dehumanizing aspect of the left is dying off, or is it getting stronger? What's happening?
I'm not sure, because obviously in the UK things are slightly different. We don't have the level of aggression that you're seeing from the left. From what I can see that is happening over there, it seems to be growing. It seems to be, I think what happens with the regressive left, as people call them, is that they do lock themselves in this kind of echo chamber. So if someone punches a Nazi and then they get cheered on by everyone else that agrees with them, and that person is already predisposed to not taking other opinions, that idea that it is okay to do that is going to spread, it's going to become accepted. So I think it's kind of self-sustaining in that way. So I think if that kind of mentality continues, then it will grow. I think if they do allow for new ideas and for opinions to be challenged, then it will subside, but I'm not too sure about if that's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, looking at the ugly sides of it, I think it is fair to at least critically look at, you know, the fringe left, or in America, what's becoming the mainstream left. But do you think Antifa has like any legitimate concerns or I guess gripes against the powers that be?
I don't think that Antifa, the way they do anything or the way they communicate in any way, is good or right or helpful. In fact, I think a lot of ways they are being the thing that they claim to hate. I think the only, probably coming at it from more of a UK perspective, the only thing that I think and I'm not even sure if this is something they're particularly concerned with, but the only thing that I would be worried about is the rise of the far right. Mm-hmm. But that's quite ironic considering that they are just as bad. But I think that is in their mind what they're fighting against, just in the completely wrong.
Yeah, well, I think that is ironic. They're fighting the moderates now, and then they'll bring out the people that they think they're fighting, and then you know, those people they're not messing around. I think it would be wise of them to listen to, I guess, the more moderate left, like, hey, you don't want to do this right now. No. Because when the far right rears its ugly head, it comes and it stays. Yeah. I mean, I think all of the right wing on Twitter and stuff, like, it's funny when they post like the Pinochet thing, like the helicopter and Pepe and all that. But when it does come, like, people are gonna start dying, and I think it's wise now to have these discussions. Don't want to see that happen here. It would just be horrendous. No. Yeah, but it seems that the left wing and the right wing in government are increasingly authoritarian. So I've recently been watching the new restrictions that are coming your way via the Tory party in the UK, and restrictions on privacy, free speech via the BBC. So yeah. What do you think about these restrictions and policies?
I think they're terrible. I personally am not a fan of the Tory party in general, but this particular proposal is a nightmare. Has lost them a lot of popularity points, like literally in the last 2 days. I think it's incredibly concerning. They basically want to regulate personal data on the internet. They want to give the government power to decide what is and isn't published on social media. I think they want to have control over even Google, because they think that Google has too much power over the content that is published, which is scary. They've kind of used the main thing that she says is that it's anti-extremism, but then she went on to say things about online bullying. And then a bit further down on the thing I read, it was about like hate content online. And what does that even mean? Because anyone can think anything is hate content. And if you're giving the power to a government on what they think is hate content, there's no way that we're gonna still have free speech or whatever intact.
Yeah, and I also saw that you know, Think of the Children was actually part of this. Do you think that's the road to indoctrination of the next generations, or is that like too conspiratorial?
Probably a bit. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's something we hear a lot in the UK. Is the Think of the Children thing. I feel like it's used a lot in politics in the UK. So I think they know what to say to get people to care about something that goes against their interests, which is every politician. But Theresa May is very good at that, I think. Another thing I saw that she wanted to do was she wanted to, well, supposedly she would have the power to regulate news. So regulate what news is shown on platforms like Facebook and Google in order to get kind of mainstream media the maximum amount of advertising. Can't really remember exactly how it was worded, but it sounded like she wanted more control because she wants to keep her friends happy, her like media friends happy or something like that, cozying up to them, because obviously it's in their best interest that Google and Facebook don't have the monopoly on like freedom of whatever.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that sounds like she's paving the way for like a propaganda machine.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, well, you can't disagree because you can't go anywhere else to find anything on this. Sounds like the perestroika during the Soviet Russian days, where it was like, hey, well, I mean, we have free press, and it's like, hey, how come I can't go over to that district? It's like we don't talk about that one.
Yeah, that is exactly what it sounds like, and like people already distrust the media.
Mm-hmm.
Get elected, and then we have our government in control of what is being put out there. That's just going to be chaos.
Yeah, and I think what's worrying is that whenever there's I guess a policy making its way to the floor like this, there's not much opposition from the other side. It's always like, all right, cool, like you guys get your 2 years or something, and then when it comes to us, we'll get to use it too.
Yeah.
And then these liberties, they never come back. It's just you just keep minimizing what people can say and do. So given that, what do you think this, I guess, this emergence of right-wing populism means for the UK, Europe, and the US?
I don't believe it's a permanent thing. I read somewhere, I can't remember where, that every financial crisis for the last 150 years has seen an insanely fast growth in right-wing populism for the 10 years after the financial crisis, mainly coming out of distrust of the establishment and things like that. And it's the perfect time really for populists to take hold of people's distrust and make them think that they're getting something new, that they're getting something different, that the power is going to be back in their hands. And I think that's part of what we've seen recently. And I also think that the right has been very clever in how they've noticed where the left has gone wrong. So in terms of in this country, it was a lack of talk of immigration, a lack of dealing with Islamic terror attacks when they happened, just complete failure to confront these problems, and they've capitalized on that. In the Brexit vote especially, I think that was a huge reason why we voted to leave. So I think it's a combination of things really. Distrust in the establishment coming out of the financial crisis, and then getting on board with things that the left don't want to talk about. I don't think it's going to get, because obviously Le Pen didn't win, and I think that had a huge impact on where the rest of the UK and the EU was going. I think if Le Pen had won, it would have grown even more, but I think now she hasn't won, I think we've kind of, I don't know, maybe it's naive of me, but I feel like we've kind of leveled out a little bit.
Yeah, before the heads start rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that interesting that, there's always this pendulum of power. Like Charles I, they beheaded him, and then they were like, I think we went a little far there. And then Charles II was like, yeah, kind of, but I'm only going to kill the guys that killed him directly, and then after that, you're good. So you mentioned Brexit, and I mean, it's pretty straightforward. British wants to leave, so they vote to leave the EU because it's becoming increasingly like a super state where, one little oligarchy has all the power and they just tell everybody else what to do. But the reactions to it is what is unclear to me. I'm not sure if it's because of the media or what, but on one end it's like the apocalypse is coming, and then on the other end it's like this is the greatest thing ever. So yeah, where do you stand on that? I'm pretty sure it's not either of the extremes.
No. Well, I voted to remain, mainly because on a selfish level, I had benefited from EU funding a lot, and friends of mine had benefited a lot from EU funding, and then that obviously will be cut off. And my city benefited a lot from EU funding in terms of like creative industries and things like that. And so I think I voted probably in my best interest. However, I don't think that the extremes that the media are portraying are what the majority of people think on either side. I don't think it's the apocalypse. But I also don't think that the narrative that we've got our country back is accurate at all. And I found really funny during the Leave campaign was that they talked so much about immigration. Immigration was the big thing that they played on. And a couple of people I knew voted to leave because of immigration. And I remember having a conversation with one person who was talking about Syrian immigration. And I had to actually point out that Syria is outside of the EU. So us leaving the EU is going to have probably no effect on refugees coming over from Syria, which I think is what most people were worried about, was immigration coming from like war-torn countries, from like Islamic war-torn countries. So I found that quite ironic, really, that I think the Leave campaign just jumped on the immigration thing, and people were so angry about the current state of things that they didn't, not all of them, but some of them didn't stop to think. And then on the other end, you had people that were just absolutely frenzied because they'd never looked into what the EU was in their life. Obviously, I was born in the EU, so I'd never know what it was like to be out of the EU. And people my age were just like, any reason to be convinced that the world would end, but they were convinced that, you know, if we were going to leave the EU, there was going to be World War III, like we were going to be the poorest country in the world, trade was going to stop, all of this. And I think it's just hysteria on both sides, and I think only time will tell, really, what will happen.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the EU had a policy on the countries within the EU having to take in refugees. Crap, I'm not sure where I heard that, but
Maybe you're right. Let me have a look.
okay, now I'm getting a bunch of like the Brexit campaign used refugees to scare voters, and I'm not seeing like policy stuff. Oh.
Because, yeah, I guess I wasn't that sure. The way I thought it was that each country, at least within reason, could decide how many refugees they took. Because I know that Germany took a ton, and compared to Germany, we didn't really take that many.
Well, I mean, also on that note, Sargon released a video yesterday or last night saying that the Tories actually didn't intend to restrict immigration anyway, because he was going through their plan implementation, and he goes, currently there's like 275,000 coming in annually, and in their like mission statement it said they're going to restrict it to the tens of thousands, but it said there's no timeline on that. And then,
Oh, okay.
yeah, for next year, they're estimating 325,000. So it's actually an
Wow.
increase when they said, we're going to get it down tenfold. So is this just like classic politics, or do you think this is more insidious?
I
Um,
think it could be either. The UK is a country that we have a long history of accepting a lot of refugees, and I think it would take a long time to get the numbers down, because they're not going to stop trying to get here, no matter what. It's not something that I think can be implemented overnight. I have to admit, I read and I must have missed the part where it said there was no time limit, because I just saw the getting it down to the tens of thousands, and I was like, because I'm not anti-immigration, but I do think there has to be controls and limits on how many, judged by how many resources the country has and how many people the country has already. So tens of thousands, I'm not an economist or anything like that, but I think that would be a lot more reasonable than what it is now. But I didn't realize that there's a time limit. That probably means that they don't actually think it's possible.
Yeah, I think, and this might be sacrilege to some of my more conservative friends, but I think capitalism has its flaws, definitely. And one of those flaws is when you have a pretty lax immigration policy, it's the business owners who benefit the most, of course, but the consumer doesn't benefit as much as the regular native worker, because all the wages are driven down by the surplus of unskilled work or labor.
Yeah.
So it's just like at what point should there be controls? Because the whole Milton Friedman, just let the market decide, dude. Like it doesn't work for everybody, and like it's being proven here in America right now. It's just not working. But then if you go toward like civic nationalism, or I guess national socialism, then it's like, oh, you're a Nazi. It's like, well, like maybe we need some controls, I think. But do you see, I guess, that mission statement as being toward national socialism, or is it just kind of a pipe dream for people?
I think probably a bit of a pipe dream. I just can't see that working in this country anytime soon. When you look at our track history, and yeah, I don't know, to be honest, what the answer is.
Oh no, it's all good. Sorry, like I kind of went on a tangent there. But anyway, this emergence of right-wing populism. You mentioned the financial crisis and how every, what was it, 100 years that this happens?
Yeah.
Like a 10-year period. So is this a definite signification of the current state of affairs for the regular person, or is this like propaganda just finally dying off?
I don't know. I read somewhere. I keep saying I read somewhere. The other day I read this article that was talking about the wage gap, the class gap between voters on the right and voters on the left. And in recent history in the UK, there has been a massive divide between Conservative voters and Labour voters. Historically, being that working class people will always vote Labour, and upper class people will always vote Conservative, because Conservative care about the rich and Labour care about the poor. But in the last something like 5 to 10 years, that gap has completely closed, and there's now an even number of people, working class people, voting Conservative as there is Labour. And I think that alone speaks volumes as to kind of how much distrust working class people, your everyday consumer, has in the government, in the establishment, for people to effectively vote for the party that historically doesn't have their best interests at heart.
Hmm.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Seems like there's a shift coming. Holy crap, I was not aware of this.
Yeah.
So in the last 5-10 years, I mean, do you think that's like a leading up toward Brexit thing, or like stances have changed within, I guess, your country's politics, or like, do you know of any factors that could have led to this?
I mean, purely speculating, like with no evidence to back up what I'm going to say.
Type in all. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say it's probably a mixture of a few things. One probably being that coming out of the deficit, like the financial crisis of 2008, was it? And just our dealing with kind of balancing the books and everything. I think second, Islamic terror. I think that's something that people desperately want to talk about, and I think they're just desperately scrambling to try and find someone in politics that will talk about it openly without being, you know, a huge bigot. Not that you're a bigot if you talk about Islam, but you know.
Yeah, that's how it gets painted.
Yeah, and I think, oh god, what was the other thing I was going to say? I think the immigration, I think just pretty much a mixture of everything we've talked about so far has left people just confused and lost and very politically homeless. And I think in the UK as well, we've been seeing with our Labour Party, which is our left-wing party, we have been seeing a shift more and more to the left, which I don't think has helped either.
Yeah, so looking at all of this, I have to turn toward everybody's favorite subject, Trump. It seems like his trip to Saudi was like a complete about face on Islam.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? I was shocked, honestly.
I wasn't shocked. I wasn't shocked, but I think it is very different when you're like kind of looking in from the outside as to when you're. Does that make sense? Like people that looking from America on Brexit can probably make observations that when you're actually invested in it, you can't. I'm not surprised because of the way that he handled himself during his campaign was just so out there and so, I guess, honest is a word that they used a lot, that it would just be impossible for him to, I think, keep that up now. I mean, could you imagine the implications for Saudi American trade? He'd gone there and said, like, all Muslims are terrorists or something, or he wants to have a Muslim registry. I think he's acting in the interest of trade in that way.
Mm-hmm. So this is like I guess the businessman coming out on him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely. He's still a businessman for sure.
Yeah, I think Twitter almost had a mental breakdown over the trip.
Yeah, did you see the pictures of him touching the orb?
No, I didn't see that.
Oh my god. They're so funny. I literally saw it like an hour ago, but there's some really good memes coming out of it.
Oh no.
You just like, hang on, let me try and Google it.
Oh god.
If you just Google like Trump orb.
Yeah, that's the first thing.
People are people are like photoshopping in like the Lord of the Rings thing.
Yeah. Oh no.
It's brilliant.
And then the face that he's making.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then I retweeted something a while, like yesterday or something, and it was, what was it? It was like, when you're still think you're a Muslim, so you have to go to temple or something. And then it's just like a gif of him like dancing with the Saudis.
Oh no. There's like 100 memes on this thing. And then the Eye of Sauron, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, I almost feel guilty for laughing. Thank you for that.
That's right.
Oh, Jesus. So going, I guess, completely veering off from that. Back on feminism, everybody was saying that he was going to be the, I guess, the antithesis of women in legislation. But I mean, did you see the deal he made with Trudeau to get more women in STEM? I think,
I
and
didn't
then
know.
yeah, he made some kind of deal with Trudeau to put like 100 million or like $1 billion into this this like stimulus package for women to get them into STEM. And then he did something else for women, and the like far right wing was like, Trump, what the hell are you doing? And then the left was like, oh, he's only doing this so he can trick him, or something like that. It was just like, oh, what? But how do you think he's doing with the whole, I guess, gender thing? Because a lot of feminists were saying he was going to end the world for women.
And the world. I'm not a fan of Trump. I never was. I don't like him. I don't think he's doing a good job. But I think there was and is a lot of hype around his personal opinions on things. And I do think a lot of it is hype. With like the women thing, it was just a hysteria. Even in my own city, across the world, when he got elected, there was like university rallies and meetings about protecting women under Trump, and what does the Trump presidency mean for women over here, and all of this stuff. And I think it was slightly ridiculous because there was legitimate concerns about the Trump presidency, but the biggest thing in his campaign was not like necessarily about women. There were so many other things that they could have focused on, but it just seemed like it was all focused on his supposed like hatred for women.
Yeah.
And I think it made their cause them seem ridiculous. And I do think there was legitimate concerns, but I don't think the way they went about it or the way they talked about it as if he was gonna like kill all the women. Like, I don't think anyone thought that, but like as if he was gonna, I don't know, send us back to the 1950s. That's what I saw some people saying. I think that was completely unfounded.
You know, I'm actually kind of disappointed in the meme makers. When the 1950s comments were being made, or like send us back 6 years,
Yeah.
and people weren't like, didn't you like the style back then, or something like that? Like, life was so much simpler.
Yeah.
But you know, they let me down. Whatever. So, I think I saw a resurgence of the patriarchy argument when Trump was elected. Like, oh my God, see, it's like always.
This is the patriarchy.
Yeah, like this is exactly what we're talking about. What is the patriarchy exactly?
I guess like historically, a patriarchy is a society where men hold the majority of all the power. Men are the kind of main providers for everything. Men are, you know, the politicians, the kings, the leaders. Men are expected to be all these things, while simultaneously women are disadvantaged and, I guess, second-class citizens.
Yeah. Okay. So some recent, I guess, soon-to-be memes or already memes are out there. I think it was Maxine Waters or somebody on CNN was saying that you don't need men to have patriarchy.
What?
Yeah, you didn't.
How does that work?
So it was like the Audre Lorde beginnings of third wave feminism kind of argument, where they were rationalizing this by saying uh, you only need, what was it, white women to oppress other women the same way men
What the
oppress
hell?
women. Yeah. Um, I mean, it is exactly as ridiculous as it sounds. Do you think any oppression of women inherently has to be patriarchy, or, I mean,
Not in the West, no. Like patriarchy is not a thing in where I live or in America. It's just not. Like actually it's not.
yeah, well, I guess
Like
you have to watch that clip. It's just amazing. Just
I
put,
will, that sounds hilarious.
yeah, you don't need men to have patriarchy. And the other woman's like, you don't?
But surely that would still be matriarchy. If you have white women oppressing other women, presumably in positions of power, that would be matriarchy, if anything, not patriarchy.
Yeah, I guess it's like they would be okay with it if like men were oppressed too. Like during that time. Okay, now it's okay.
Yeah.
Because I've seen that a lot from feminists, and if I'm being unfair, let me know. But so if there's like a male privilege that they perceive, they'll fight it until there's like complete equity. I wouldn't really say equality because it's just not the same thing. But when women have like a distinct advantage over men in some cases, they're just like, they put it on the back burner.
Yeah.
So I think it's when you have a complete matriarchy that most feminists would be okay with it. And only like the really radical ones would be pissed because they'd be like, hey, it's only white women that are at the top. And what about black women and Latina women? Like, why can't they oppress men? And it's like, well, what about Asian women? And they're like, I mean, we don't really like to talk about them.
Yeah, just goes on forever. I feel like if we were in a matriarchy, like a real matriarchy, some, not obviously not all of them, but some like radical feminists would be almost like people that expect reparations. They'd be like, well, they'd be like, this is our reparations. We were oppressed for centuries, and now it's on the other foot, so you deserve it. I can just imagine that being an argument.
Oh, definitely. Like, oh, my mom made dinner and lunch for years. Like, that'll be $80,000, please.
Yeah. Well, I think on a small level that attitude exists because, and I've probably been guilty of this in the past when I still identified as a feminist, and it's this thing that when you're talking about women's issues and a man will bring up like anything that is like negative for a man. So say you're talking about domestic violence against women, which is obviously an awful thing, but a man will bring up the fact that his girlfriend hit him or something. It's then just like the instinctual thing, and I've seen it a lot for women to go, yeah, but women have it worse.
Yeah,
we have it worse. So why are you even talking about it? Like, it's kind of like, you don't need to talk about it because we have it worse. You should be helping us, and that really bothers me.
Yeah, and it's not even like, well, I have it worse. It's like this collective weird thing where it's like, well, these women have had it worse like 8 years ago. What?
Yeah. It's like plug into the like feminist hive mind. So you suddenly become just like angry on behalf of everyone.
Yeah, oh man. So they do this a lot. I took this class in Native American literature, and this guy was using the term Indian to describe natives. And my grandpa, he's like a card-carrying native, and he says Indian. And this guy was saying Indian, and like this feminist just went fucking ape shit. He was like, "Oh, how dare you? That's an ignorant word." He's like, "I'm half Indian. What the hell?"
I don't mind. So why do you?
Yeah, and she was like, "Oh, well, it's oppressive to use that. You're oppressing your own kind." He was like, "What are you talking about?"
That happens a lot as well. Like people getting offended on behalf of people that don't give a crap. Like,
Yeah.
I remember I was watching something. It was like a comedian, and he was saying how like a group of women protested against
Oh, I
the
think I lost it.
cultural from those cultures do not care.
Yeah. There was an article from Washington Post where it was like 85 or 90% of the Native Americans we asked about the term Redskins or the team, like they didn't care. And
Yeah.
the like you can see it in the writing that the journalist
Yeah.
is having internal conflicts about it. And then he just like straight up asks in the op-ed, he goes, should we be offended for people like on their behalf? It was just like, no, dude, what are you doing?
Oh my god.
Uh,
I feel like people they like enjoy it. They like enjoy getting offended on people's behalf.
yeah,
Like it gives them meaning.
yeah, like I guess it makes people feel virtuous, or you know, like they're some kind of paladin for others, or like it's okay, little oppressed brown boy, like we'll
Yeah. Yeah. It's really condescending.
yeah. I don't know. I like I guess a bit of trolling that I do is, you know how they use POC for like people of color.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's like the dumbest term ever. So like I'll say POC, and like that's not how it's supposed to be said, and then I'll type it out and it'll be PO, and then I'll capitalize the KKK part, and they're like, what are you doing? And it's just like, I mean, don't invalidate my experience. And they're like, it's not how it works. I'm like, well then how does it work? Explain it to me.
Yeah.
And like they can't see how ridiculous it is when people are making fun of them like that. But I've always noticed that the most ardent defenders of social justice are usually like my white professors, and then like my Hispanic professors and Indian and Arabic and all the other colors, they just don't care most of the time. And I just wonder why that is. Like, what is it, like a white guilt
Do you
thing?
think it's like do you think it is this mysterious white guilt?
I
Like
I think so.
because
Like,
I don't know why else they would feel like that. Especially when it's not perhaps representative of people that actually like matter when it comes to these things.
yeah, I think the weirdest thing, like here in the U.S., uh, slavery is still an argument somehow. I don't
Yeah.
know how it happened, but it still is. I guess it's too many Civil War movies. But if you look into the, I guess the heritage part of it, it's like less than 5% of white Americans today have history or heritage that traces them back to slave owners. But if you look at the per capita results, it's like 2% of white Americans at that time owned slaves. And then it's like something like 6 or 7% of black Americans owned slaves. So it's just like, if you want to make slavery an argument, then I mean, you're going to have to trace yourself back too. But I guess people just don't like to look into that because
Yeah.
it's
What I don't
like,
get with the slavery argument as well is that if you actually look back at history, almost every like beginning with like tribes and like hunter-gatherer tribes and every society and community and every single throughout humanity were guilty of some kind of slavery. So
it was
how
just
far back do you want to go? Like,
yeah, it was just the way of the world. And then they're like, well, if the Arabs had slaves, why aren't there like surviving records or writings of the white slaves that were there? It's like, because they were butchered, most of them. Like,
yeah.
I mean, the women were sex slaves until they weren't useful anymore, and then they were kind of just killed off, and then the men were worked to death after they were castrated. So, I mean, they had pretty bad conditions. I'm not taking anything away from American slavery, but
Yeah.
like, Jesus, dude, it's apples to oranges.
Yeah. And I don't like the kind of blame game, like the blame game of like white people have to apologize for something that had literally nothing to do with. The only thing I kind of understand is that obviously when it all gets disillusioned, I get how a government would be expected to apologize on behalf, but not 200 years later, and especially it's not the responsibility of the individual citizens to apologize for something that they had nothing to do with. That's, in my view, that's the same as someone saying to me, well, 600 years ago, your ancient ancestors did this to someone and it's your fault. Like, it's like you're not personally responsible for the actions of anyone else just because you have one sort of similar feature to them.
I think what would put it into perspective for a lot of young people is if you put it in terms of like a breakup, 10 years later, like you're already married and stuff and you have kids and like an ex-boyfriend from like high school calls you.
Yeah.
And you're like, who's this? And like, oh my God, you don't remember? And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And it's like, you cheated on me 12 years ago.
Yeah.
How dare you? And you're like, oh, I'm
Like
sorry.
the friend of your ex-boyfriend like getting angry at you for something that happened vaguely when you were together to him that was nothing to do with you. And you're like, how am I connected to this? They're like, well, you were there that night that I got punched, so it's obviously your fault.
And then even if you apologize to them, like it's already consumed their lives to the point they're tracking you down to call you. It's like, well, I don't know what good this is gonna do. I think we're just about out of time, but do you have any like last words or anything like that? Not last words, but
last words. What's happening? No, just thank you for having me. It's been cool. This is my first interview stream, so it's pretty cool to get to do it.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I hope that we can speak again soon. Maybe
for sure.
Something.
Yeah.
I'm gonna send you that link right now to the Young Men for Patriarchy. Like it's awesome.
I'm so excited.
All right. Well, you have a great day, and we will talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.